sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security. These millions and millions of people coming in, they're trying to put them on Social Security. He will wipe out Social Security. He will wipe out Medicare. So he was right in the way he finished that sentence. And it's a shame. What's happened to our country in the last 4 years is not to be believed. Foreign countries, I'm friends with a lot of people. They cannot believe what happened to the United States of America. We're no longer respected. They don't like us. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people. What we're doing for other countries, and they do nothing for us. What this man has done is absolutely criminal.
You're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. It's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
Welcome to High Cheese. It's Friday, June 28th, 2024. And last night was a great day for America. And it was also a sad day for America. Donald Trump went into the lion's den and exposed the media, the deep state, as a bunch of phonies. He exposed Joe Biden as a doddering old fool that's in charge of this country. He also exposed the media. And we've known this all along. The media has been covering up for Joe Biden since 2019. Here's a guy that ran his campaign in his basement. Media covered for him. They covered up a questionable election. And during his 3.5 years in term as president, they covered up for the mental incapacities of this president. And they're at fault here. They did not do the American people justice by propping up this guy. And Donald Trump exposed them. All of them. Now, I know going into this debate, some people were saying, oh, Donald Trump's going into the lion's den. He's with CNN, Jake Tapper. He's got a lot of exposure here. But Donald Trump has great instincts. He has great political instincts. And like a good athlete, he knows when it's time to crush your enemy. When you got him on the ropes, you go in for the knockout punch. And this is what Donald Trump did last night. I mean, you should have seen Joe Biden. Now, I played some audio here, but it was worse when you saw it on the TV. Not only was Joe Biden incoherent, but there are extended camera shots of him just dazed and confused, slack-jawed, looking out into space, coming back with incoherent answers. And this is the President of the United States. And this was all exposed last night. We've got a corrupt administration in Washington. We've got a corrupt media. We've got a corrupt deep state. And they've done everything to try to prop this guy up to save their own power. It's not about the American people. It's about their own power. And Donald Trump exposed this. Now, I want to go back to another clip. And it's with CNN's John King. And they were in a state of panic after this debate. I was watching MSNBC, all blank stares on their panel. What the heck is going on here? We've been exposed. We got our hands caught in the cookie jar. That's the look that they had. And the immediate reports were that the Democrats are in a state of panic over this. So let's go to John King, and then we'll come back and discuss.
It involves party strategists. It involves elected officials. It involves fundraisers. And they're having conversations about the president's performance, which they think was dismal, which they think will hurt other people down the party in the ticket. And they're having conversations about what they should do about it. Some of those conversations include, should we go to the White House and ask the president to step aside? Other of the conversations are about, should prominent Democrats go public with that call? Because they feel this debate was so terrible.
And it's pretty clear that they want Joe Biden gone. The deep state, media, Washington insiders, they want Joe Biden gone. But there's a wrench in this whole thing. Now, a lot of people think that the deep state, Washington, they all work in unison. And they don't. Eventually they do. But there's competing interests. There's competing lust for power. And they'll kill each other for that power. Now, here's the wrench in the whole thing. The wrench in the whole thing is Joe Biden, his wife Jill, and those people that are benefiting from Joe Biden being in office, the individuals. I guess Jake Sullivan, people like that. Now, it was a pitiful scene. Joe Biden had to be helped off stage by his wife. And then afterwards, I had an afterward party. And Joe Biden went up there with his wife, and his wife essentially spoke for him. The other thing I find insightful is at this after-debate party, there were no other politicians up there with them. It was just Joe and Jill. And again, I think it's Jill that's putting the kibosh on moving Joe Biden out. She likes the trappings of the position, as well as the other people that are making money and making their power by having Joe Biden as president. So that's the schism right now. And that's the political schism right now. And I've been saying all along, they're going to swap him out at some point. Some people are saying it may be too late, but I don't know. Now, that's the political side of it. That's the political dilemma for them. Their dilemma is to the benefit of the American people. While they're eating each other, Donald Trump is going to grow and grow in the polls. And if he had the election today, he would win an electoral landslide. Now, don't get cocky. You still have to go out and vote. Now, here's why I call it a sad day. I actually should call it a dangerous day for America. You've got the likes of Putin. You've got the likes of Xi. You got the likes of Kim Jong-un. They're taking a look at Biden's performance last night. And they say, holy smokes. We can have a field day here with this guy in power. And these are dangerous times for the United States. China looking at taking over Taiwan. Do you think the risk of them taking over Taiwan was just elevated as a result of last night? Sure was. There's no one in charge at the White House. And you've got the White House making some type of comment about, Biden had a cold. Oh, it was much worse than that. He's had a brain cold for the past 6 years. And what's going to go on, even if they cut a deal to have Biden step aside? Now, is he going to step aside and then have Kamala Harris as the president? Well, that's not much better. So look at the dilemma that they have right now. And because they are in charge, look at the dilemma that the United States has right now. We've got incompetent leaders. We've got incompetent administrators because it's all about ideology. It's all about protecting power. And the other option is will Biden stay in office and just say he's not going to run, step aside and have somebody else? And who's that going to be? And that's still a dangerous situation because you still have an incompetent president in the White House until next January. You may have another candidate running for president, but you still have this doddering old fool in the White House until January 20th. So the Democrats have backed themselves in the corner. They were just so arrogant, and again, not very bright, with their decision to string Joe Biden along. Keep this doddering old fool as president because we can keep him propped up. We can make the decisions for him. And Donald Trump exposed it. So we shall see. Okay, the Supreme Court came out with several important decisions this week, and I want to go over two of them. And the first one has to do with the J6 convictions. And let me just read this article, and this is from the Gateway Pundit. It says, SCOTUS delivers a major blow to corrupt Biden's DOJ. It overturns the use of 1512C2 in J6 cases. It's a massive win for political prisoners. It goes on to say the Supreme Court of the United States has overturned the Department of Justice's use of 1512C2, a statute pertaining to obstruction of an official proceeding in cases related to the events surrounding January 6th. The ruling signifies a major win for both political prisoners, as it is seen as a significant setback for the Biden regime. The decision reveals that the Department of Justice unlawfully prosecuted over 350 Americans for their participation in January 6th, a blatant misuse of law aimed at punishing those who protested Biden's election and at criminalizing political dissent. Hundreds of defendants had taken plea deals because of the severe threat of being charged with 18 U.S.C. 1512. So what happens is that 1512 is a felony. So what happened is that the Department of Justice, the corrupt Department of Justice, they used the U.S.C. 1512, which is a felony, to persuade some of these J6ers into pleading guilty because they were facing felonies. Now, most of the, or without this 1512, most of the charges were simply misdemeanors. So what the Department of Justice did is they threatened these J6ers with this 1512, which is a felony, like I said. And with that felony comes a long prison term. So it essentially forced them to take a plea deal. And it's been abused. And this is also being used against Donald Trump. So let's go on. The DOJ has never used this statute before for demonstrations, even those protests that have descended into skirmishes, violence, riots, arson, assault, death, or worse. Washington, D.C. was under siege of arson and riots in 2017 before and during Donald Trump's inauguration. If the DOJ had never before believed that 18 U.S.C. 1512 covers demonstrations, why should the Supreme Court take a different view today? Now, in a 6-3 vote, the court holds that to prove a violation of the law, the government must show that the defendant impaired the availability or integrity for use of an official proceeding of records, documents, objects, or other things used in an official proceeding, or an attempt to do so. So what does this mean for Donald Trump and the J6ers that pled guilty and or were convicted of various crimes, including this 1512? Well, in Donald Trump's case, it throws a wrench into Jack Smith's entire case against Trump in Washington. Now, for the J6ers, those that pled guilty, I think they have to go back and get resentenced again to these lesser crimes, which should result in much shorter sentences. Now, for those J6ers that were convicted of this crime, they'll likely have to have another trial. So it's a really good day for democracy. It's a really good day for us Americans. You know, and this decision by the Supreme Court really coincides with a recent poll that came out. I think it was from the Washington Post that said that Donald Trump, by a significant amount, is viewed as the person who will protect democracy much more than Joe Biden. And here's a perfect example. You have a weaponized Department of Justice going after the President of the United States, going after the J6ers, and essentially making up law as they go along. And people see through this. They understand that this Department of Justice is weaponized by Joe Biden. Hence, you see the polls. Hence, you see that it's Donald Trump that will protect democracy. Now, the second decision I want to talk about relates to the Leviathan that we have down in Washington, this massive bureaucratic state that affects your life and my life. Now, for years, since the early 1920s, this Leviathan has been growing on and on and on. And that's what bureaucracies do. They just grow and expand. And that's the nature of a bureaucracy unless it's checked. It'll just continue to grow and wield more power as the years goes on. Now, these bureaucracies have grown to the point where they began interpreting the laws of the land. They hired their own administrative law judges to rubber stamp their decisions. And it was essentially codified into law about 40 years ago with the Chevron decision. And essentially what this Chevron decision did 40 years ago is defer the court's authority to this administrative state. These bureaucrats were now allowed to interpret law in their own way, enforce law in their own way, without having any checks by our judicial system. And today, this all changed with the Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, who's the Secretary of Commerce. So let me read a little article here, and this is from Fox. I don't like to read Fox a lot, but this is an op-ed piece by Senator Eric Schmidt. It says, Loper Bright was brought to the court by fishermen challenging the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's at-sea monitor program. This program required fishermen to host a government employee on their vessel to monitor compliance with federal regulations, all at the fisherman's expense, which amounted to a whopping $700 per day. Think about it. You're a fisherman, you're going out to earn a living, and you've got to have some bureaucrat sitting on your boat to the tune of $700 a day. These charges, not even authorized by federal law, could add up to thousands of dollars over a multi-day voyage. Failure to comply meant that the fishermen, who have risked their lives every day to deliver food to the tables of American families across our country, would be unable to fish and provide for their own families. In short, the government told small business owners, without any basis in law, that they had to accommodate a so-called expert or lose their livelihoods. The Chevron doctrine gave the NOAA this power by requiring judges to be deferential to federal agencies' interpretation of statutes when the law is ambiguous. It granted federal bureaucrats who were not elected nor accountable to the public the power to make up and interpret their own policies. And this has been going on for years and years. Unchecked for decades, Chevron deference allowed the administrative state to morph into a quasi-fourth branch of government. And there's nothing in the Constitution about a fourth branch of government. So, as Justice Neil Gorsuch fittingly highlighted during the Loper Bright oral arguments in January, the Chevron doctrine undeniably has this disparate impact on different classes of person, especially those who have no power to influence agencies. So essentially the Supreme Court came in and said, you can't do this. You do not have the constitutional authority to do anything like this. And it's a win for the American people. It's a win for the Constitution. And it brings us back closer and closer to what our founding fathers wanted for this country. And the administrative state took another hit this week by the Supreme Court. And let me just read an article here. It's in Breitbart. And it says here, the Supreme Court on Thursday ruled a person accused by the Securities and Exchange Commission of civil fraud has a right to trial by jury before a federal judge, rejecting the agency's authority to bring enforcement action and assess fines through internal tribunals. The ruling is a significant blow to what has become in recent years one of the primary enforcement mechanisms against fraud in cases brought by the SEC, which regulates security markets. The agency's practice of dragging those accused of securities fraud before an in-house tribunal often adjudicated by the very agency bringing the accusations by administrative law judges who are often seen as rubber stamps for the agencies. It violates the right to a jury by trial, said Chief Justice John Roberts in a 6-3 decision. A defendant facing a fraud suit has the right to be tried by a jury of his peers before a neutral adjudicator, the Chief Justice wrote. And again, this is another win for the American people. This is another decision against the administrative state. And again, overall, it was a good week. But I've got some sad news here. Apparently, the Supreme Court is not going to take up Steve Bannon's case. So Steve Bannon, who next to Donald Trump is probably the most important person in the MAGA movement, was subpoenaed by the phony J6 hearing committee, and he told them to pound sand. So they, in turn, charged him with contempt of Congress. And he went to court, and he lost. In Washington, of course. And he was sentenced to 4 months. So he petitioned the Supreme Court, and I haven't read the opinion, but they said they were not going to take this case up to on appeal. So he's in for 4 months. He's going to start his sentence on Monday, July 1st. And again, this is nothing more than just election interference by the opposition. We've had several cases in the past where Democrats had ignored a congressional subpoena. How about Eric Holder under Obama? He ignored a congressional subpoena. We've got Merrick Garland not handing over the audio of Joe Biden's classified document interview. And so far, nothing has happened to him. Now, from what I hear is I think Congress is going to move to hold him in contempt. And we'll see what happens there. But again, this is nothing more than election interference by the Democrats that have influence on our judicial system, our bureaucracies, our politics. But ultimately, Bannon will win. And Bannon will win with a victory by Donald Trump in November. So with that said, thank you very much for listening. You have a good week, and I will talk to you next Saturday.